What does the death of acting legend Robert Duvall have to do with the Munich Security Conference? And we are probably alone in this, found the connection. The search for Nancy Guthrie, mother of TV Savannah Guthrie, continues as authorities declare, for the first time, not one member of the Guthrie family is under suspicion. Another Winter Olympics update from our intrepid Kelly O'Grady. Big news for Team USA from the sledding venue known as the House of Speed. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. The Munich Security Conference is not the type of event that would typically hold this show or this audience in thrall. But as with all things Europe in this second term of President Trump, the Munich plot twists are many. Bonds of friendship have been tested, and questions about betrayal are no longer fringy or fantastical. The transatlantic relationship, you see, stands bruised and battered amid clashes over trade, support for Ukraine, tech regulation, and the future of Greenland. Put in cinematic terms that will become clearer as metaphor in just a moment, this question looms: is the alliance still a family? Secretary of State Marco Rubio told assembled European leaders, yes, it was. But the family, he said, had to come to terms with what he called the delusions of globalization and large-scale migration.
Under President Trump, the United States of America will once again take on the task of renewal and restoration, driven by a vision of a future as proud, as sovereign, and as vital as our civilization's past. And while we are prepared, if necessary, to do this alone, it is our preference and it is our hope to do this together with you, our friends here in Europe. For the United States and Europe, we belong together.
Rubio also tried to soothe anxieties about President Trump's determination to dominate the Western Hemisphere.
So in a time of headlines heralding the end of the transatlantic era, let it be known and clear to all that this is neither our goal nor our wish. Because for us Americans, our home may be in the Western Hemisphere, but we will always be a child of Europe.
Europeans remain skeptical. They know Trump drives bargains belligerently and are bracing for 3 more years of that. Still, Rubio did not sound as rough as Vice President J.D. Vance did at the same conference 1 year ago.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America.
Back then, the Trump White House believed it could end Russia's war with Ukraine. It hasn't. Moreover, Russia appears as disinterested in peace as ever, possibly more so. And Russia's relationship to the civilized world took another dark turn at Munich this weekend when the United Kingdom, Sweden, France, the Netherlands, and Germany jointly announced Russia killed dissident Alexei Navalny with a lethal toxin found in the skin of South American dart frogs. Navalny died in a Siberian prison 2 years ago. Samples from Navalny's body were smuggled out of Russia. The investigation nation said in part, and I quote, "Dart frogs in captivity do not produce this toxin, and it is not found naturally in Russia. There is no innocent explanation," the statement said, "for its presence in Navalny's body." Today, Russia denied this allegation. The evidence, nevertheless, has been flagged as a flagrant violation of the International Chemical Weapons Convention. Back to Rubio. He came to Munich, as all secretaries of state do, as a sort of diplomatic consigliere to the American president. Now, here's the cinematic part I promised a moment ago, spoken with sadness and respect. Robert Duvall, one of the most important actors of his generation, died today. He was 95. Duvall's movie credits include Tender Mercies, The Great Santini, Network, Apocalypse Now, and the popular TV miniseries on CBS known as Lonesome Dove. Duvall is also known for his role as Tom Hagen, consigliere, in Godfather 1 and Godfather 2. Here he is after failing to persuade an egotistical Hollywood executive, I know that's redundant, to do a favor for the head of the family, Don Corleone.
And if that gumbar tries any rough stuff, you tell him I ain't no band leader. Yeah, I heard that story.
Thank you for the dinner and a very pleasant evening. Maybe your car could take me to the airport. Mr. Corleone is a man who insists on hearing bad news immediately.
Making no other comparisons, and I mean zero, between Duvall's character and Rubio, we can all agree President Trump insists on hearing bad news immediately and often responding accordingly. With more on Munich, Navalny, and Rubio's diplomacy, we turn to Elliot Abrams. He's a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, most recently a special representative to Iran and Venezuela in the first Trump term. He also served as Deputy National Security Advisor to President George W. Bush. Elliot, always good to see you. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate your time.
Good to be here, Major.
So evaluate Munich, the Navalny angle of it, and how Europeans are regarding their future in the next year with the Trump administration.
They're worried. What most concerns them is the greatest war in Europe since World War II in Ukraine after the invasion by Russia. And Secretary Rubio's speech, they liked a lot more than last year's Vance speech. But you know, the word Russia was not in Secretary Rubio's speech.
Yeah.
He didn't say Russia one time. So they didn't hear, an awful lot of pragmatic, practical reassurance. They heard some really lovely language about, our common history and values and all, but they didn't hear anything concrete about an American commitment to help. And this happens, as you've just finished saying, on a weekend when we're reminded that Putin kills his opponents.
Right. And Elliot, I can remember a time, now I know it was the Cold War, but there would be references by American leaders to Solzhenitsyn or to refuseniks or to others in Russia, and we would say we hold them up as either victims of this regime or representatives of something we want to combat. This seemed to me to be a perfect opportunity for someone in the American government to say, this Navalny thing is real. We are angry about it, and we're going to hold it up as representative of something we oppose, not just in Ukraine, but internationally.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's fairly shocking that not one U.S. official seems to have commented on it, not the president, not the secretary, not, even a spokesman for the State Department. And this pretty dramatic event. They're using really rare poisons to kill somebody who was completely peaceful and was just an opponent of Putin and his system. So that, when they think about it a little bit more, I think the Europeans are not going to be reassured by what is really silence about this. Now, of course, there's going to be a negotiation coming on Ukraine, but they're worried about that too, because they're worried that the United States or the Trump administration is just going to give away too much. That is, we just want it to end. And it seems that we don't care as much about how it ends.
And there's a sense, based on what I read in European newspapers and coverage of Munich in the last couple of months, that Europeans have decided, principally over Greenland, that these things are not going to be put back together in the way they once were, that Greenland was such an affront, such a challenge to the underlying existence of and imperative of NATO, that even after the Trump administration, it's going to be hard to think of this alliance and this relationship as it was once thought of. How do you evaluate that?
Oh, I think that's right, because the idea that the United States would seem to threaten to use force against a NATO ally, in this case Denmark, which owns Greenland, was unthinkable. It would just never occur to you. Well, it happened. So now it's thinkable. They can't just forget about it. We didn't hear those kinds of words, those kinds of threats from Secretary Rubio, but of course that's got to raise in the minds of Europeans a question of, well, there's Trump, there's Vance, there's Rubio, there were many others at the conference. Who really speaks for the United States? And obviously, the answer is the president. And they're going to be wondering about what happens over the coming 3 years, almost getting down to 2.5 until the next presidential election. But they're also wondering about what happens after our election in November. If the president loses his majority in the House, getting legislation through Congress is going to be even tougher. And a lot of presidents, I think, when that happens, turn more to foreign policy, where they have more leeway. So I would say the Europeans, they're feeling better today than they were before Secretary Rubio's speech. But Greenland doesn't disappear. It happened. The thought is in their minds.
Elliot Abrams, always appreciate your time and your expertise, sir. Thank you so very much.
My pleasure.
We're following breaking news from Rhode Island tonight, where police have been called to the scene of a shooting at a high school hockey game. It happened at the Dennis Lynch Arena in the town of Pawtucket, that is just north of Providence. The head of our crime and policing unit, Anna Schechter, joins me now. Anna, what do we know?
Well, we know that 3 people have died, including the suspect, apparently from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and 3 more are in critical condition at a nearby hospital. And we understand that this was some kind of a family dispute. This was not a student shooter, but a member of a family opened fire there. Terrifying. It was actually live streamed. The hockey game that was going on at that ice rink was being live streamed. And so you hear more than a dozen gunshots fired. There are several schools that contributed players to these teams. Several of them said all their players and family members were accounted for, and we're just waiting to hear a little bit more about exactly what happened and why at this rink, Major.
Anna Schechter, thank you very, very much. Now to the search as it continues for Nancy Guthrie. Late today, law enforcement confirmed that they have ruled out every single member of the Guthrie family as potential suspects. Today, co-host Savannah Guthrie also posted another video pleading for her mother's safe return.
We still have hope, and we still believe. And I wanted to say to whoever has her or knows where she is that it's never too late.
Andres Gutierrez, as he has been for days, going on weeks now, joins us from Tucson. Catch us up on the latest.
Well, Major, law enforcement sources tell CBS News that officials out here are using a very high-tech device that it's called the so-called signal sniffer that essentially picks up low-powered electronic signals. It's usually mounted on a helicopter, flies low, sweeping for any blip that could match the pacemaker of Nancy Guthrie. It often detects a signal. It helps narrow down a search to a smaller area that ground crews can focus on. Investigators usually turn to it in cases of tough missing person cases like this one. But so far, law enforcement have not said if they have received any hits so far when it comes to Nancy Guthrie's case.
And the statement late this afternoon ruling out every single member of the Guthrie family as a potential suspect. That was, as I read the statement, a signal to those who have been speculating about this to try to sort of close that off as something that investigators, either local or federal, are pursuing.
Absolutely. At this point, they're saying that the family is not a suspect in this case, that any assumptions or tying it is essentially cruel. The FBI, though, now leaning on forensic evidence. They're saying that one of the 16 gloves that they recovered out here at the scene matches the one that was seen on that doorbell camera video. We're told that by investigators that they have developed a male DNA profile from that glove, and they are entering into CODIS, which is the FBI National DNA database. If there is someone in that database that it matches to, we could have a name tied for the suspect. However, remember, you are only on this database if you have ever been charged or convicted of a crime, which is about 6 to 7% of the U.S. population. However, if they don't get a hit there, they could always turn to genealogy companies and see if there's anyone who perhaps matches that profile there. On Friday, they also ended up carrying out a search warrant at a home at a neighborhood about 2 miles miles west of where we're at. They ended up questioning the people in that home. They released them. There was also a driver that was pulled over about 7 minutes south from that house into a Culver's parking lot. That's a fast food joint for those on the East Coast. That person was questioned, also released. So at this point, they are essentially leading on these forensics, hopefully closing in on a suspect. But right now, there are all this manpower that's been dedicated to this case, more than 13,000 tips that are still currently being vetted, and more resources continue to be brought in here, Major.
Andres Gutierrez in Tucson for us. Thank you so very much. Former FBI agent Lance Leising joins me now. Lance, I'm glad to have your expertise here. As you peer into this case, now in its third week, what stands out to you?
I think it's progressing like you would expect. So this isn't a case where you have all the time in the world. You've got a victim out there that still could easily be in danger, and time is still of the essence, even though a lot of time has passed. So you're going to see investigators take a few risks, lean forward on any probable cause they have to search a residence or to reasonable suspicion to detain an individual. And they're likely doing that a little quicker than they would in a case where you don't have an outstanding victim, because they want to find this victim, right? So you're seeing evidence of that. You're seeing some detentions and then release. You're seeing a search, but the individuals were released. And that's a nature of a case where you've got a victim outstanding and you're leaning forward, trying to do as much as you can to find her.
Lance, you just heard Andres reference this glove and the DNA analysis. For the glove to be there and to be related to this crime, the criminal would have to be incredibly clumsy. Am I wrong about that?
Well, you're not wrong at all. There's some evidence of the clumsiness from the surveillance videos released from the Nest camera. I mean, it does not look like somebody who's prepared to commit a professional level crime. It looks like somebody who's done some research on how to conceal themselves or keep some forensic evidence out of there. But if they left a glove behind, a glove which would absolutely contain forensic evidence, that's unusual. I would like to know exactly where that glove is found. We would like to know a lot of other things. And your reporter was right that a hidden CODIS would be ideal. However, any unknown DNA from an item that was intimately part of the crime scene is huge direct evidence. It'll ultimately help validate tips in the future. And then forensic genetic genealogy that he was referring to. When I worked in the FBI, we solved several cases using that, and it's like pulling a suspect out of thin air. That takes a little more time. You might not see something immediate there, but that could help solve the case as well.
Lance, it has been said in other venues and online, it doesn't look like these investigators are getting very far. Looks like they're bumbling, tripping over themselves. It has been my experience, and I used to do this earlier in my career, that investigators will take that public dialogue all the time because they're doing other things that are invisible by their very nature.
We probably only know 5% of what those investigators know. They're pursuing leads proactively and also reactively. The 13,000 outstanding tips, they're reacting to those. However, the proactive nature of every item you saw in that surveillance video, of all these other tips that have come in and their follow-up and investigation of those, of cellular analysis, of the electronic devices like the pacemaker they're searching for, all of these are avenues they're pursuing. It is easy to sit back and be a Monday morning quarterback in hindsight, but these cases are complex, they're overwhelming, the number of tips. You have a true whodunit, so there's pressure because you want to solve this for the victim and the victim's families. But it looks to me like the investigation is progressing. It's also narrowing and focusing. The announcement today that the family's not suspects, that's a focusing of the investigation. That helps investigators as well.
The Pima County Sheriff, Chris Nanos, told my colleague, Jonathan Vigliotti, there's been no sign of life, but I'm not going to tell you, too, there's been no sign of death. The family believes she's alive. They have that hope. So do we. Does that sound confident to you?
It's a telling statement. And in fact, I think that's a good statement. I think if you're a dedicated investigator, you're going to hold out hope as long as you can. You're not going to dismiss the possibility that she might be alive. So you're going to lean forward into evidence. You're going to search houses maybe before you would if you think she's dead. You're going to detain people and talk to people and try to get to the bottom of a lead very quickly. I think they're doing that here. As an investigator, you've got to hold out a little bit of hope, but be rational and look at all objective leads. As a family member, you're going to hold out hope as long as you can.
Lance Lysing, I appreciate the time and expertise very much, sir. Thank you. On Capitol Hill, the partial government shutdown now in its third day. Lawmakers, well, they're out of town, House and Senate. But negotiations continue over ways to fund the Department of Homeland Security. For more on that, we turn to Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill. Nicole?
Yeah, well, what we have learned, Major, is that Democrats have yet to respond to the latest White House counteroffer. Keep in mind that counteroffer came in last Wednesday. This was legislative text that the White House put forth to Democrats after putting forth an initial offer that Democrats said was incomplete and insufficient. So the White House went back to the drawing board, provided some additional legislative text last Wednesday, but Democrats have not responded since. Now, they are working on a response, but as you know, Major, there have been ongoing negotiations between Democrats and the White House over this issue of immigration enforcement, specifically with respect to ICE. And of course, this comes on the heels of those tragic shootings involving two U.S. citizens in Minnesota, Renee Good and Alex Preddy. That's kind of when things really escalated in terms of this debate and Democrats changing their posture around funding for the Department of Homeland Security. What I can tell you is that Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, of course, was on Face the Nation over the weekend, where he reiterated some of Democrats' core proposals, everything from a prohibition on masks for ICE agents. Obviously, Democrats are also pushing for the implementation of judicial warrants. They also believe that agents should wear body cameras, carry proper identification. They want to see an end to racial profiling, among other things. Tom Homan, who also was on Face the Nation over the weekend, the border czar, who has since taken over operations in Minnesota, called some of those requests unreasonable, saying that, the White House unlikely would be willing to accept all of those demands. So obviously, with both sides kind of far apart here, it's unclear when this funding lapse for the Department of Homeland Security will end, Major.
Nicole Killian, thank you very much. Still to come.
The rogue behavior of agents of the federal government is deeply concerning and dangerous.
Still to come on the Takeout, former President Obama on immigration enforcement in Minneapolis, what he calls rogue behavior and lingering dangers of tough Trump administration tactics. Plus, ESPN's Stephen A. Smith, never without an opinion on athletes, says he will spend this year in training for political debates. What he told our Robert Costa about his party affiliation and 2028. And he may be the most adventurous man in Washington. I certainly think so. CBS News political contributor recently back from Antarctica because, well, climbing Mount Everest simply wasn't enough. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. The Trump administration is withdrawing most of the 3,000 federal agents it sent to Minneapolis to conduct immigration sweeps. But aggressive interior enforcement elsewhere in the country, the administration says, will continue. Former President Obama, in a podcast interview, said peaceful protests should continue.
It is important for us to recognize the unprecedented nature of what ICE was doing in Minneapolis, St. Paul. The rogue behavior of agents of the federal government is deeply concerning and dangerous.
Weijia Jiang has the latest from the White House. Weijia, those who served in the Obama administration like to point out that there was a time he was referred to not always complimentarily as the deporter-in-chief. So President Obama has some experience with overseeing deportation operations in this country and considers the tactics under the Trump administration far too aggressive.
That's right, Major. During this podcast, the former president did not go after the Trump policies and what the Trump administration is doing to target certain immigrant groups, but he really focused on the tactics that he says these federal officers are using to provoke and to endanger the residents of Minnesota. You heard a little bit of what he said there, and that really reinforces the statements that he has also released publicly about the fact that he believes, I should say, that these officers are acting without clear guidelines, and so chaos is ensuing. We should point out that the White House directly responded to what Obama said and said in part in his statement that anyone pointing the finger at law enforcement officers instead of the criminals is simply doing the bidding of criminal illegal aliens. Major.
Your colleague, my colleague, Ed O'Keefe, sat in for our other colleague, Margaret Brennan, on Face the Nation yesterday and talked to Tom Homan, the White House immigration czar, about masks and being unidentifiable if you're an ICE agent on some of these sweeps. Are those two things necessary? Do they have to wear masks, and do they have to go in without visible identification? Here's how he responded.
As far as the mask, look, I don't like the masks either, but because threats against ICE officers, are up over 1,500%, actual assaults, and threats are up over 8,000%. These men and women have to protect themselves. As far as identifying themselves, they all have placards identifying themselves as ICE, ERO, HSI, DEA, FBI. So they all have placards on them. So I'll let the White House and members of Congress, fight that out.
What is the White House perspective on the state of negotiations with congressional Democrats, specifically Senate Democrats, on DHS funding?
Well, we know that the White House has exchanged texts of various proposals with the Democrats in the past week or so, but President Trump himself has not yet, at least publicly, personally engaged, although he has spoken out about that very point, Major, which seems to be the sticking point here, the issue of the masks, because he says, look, these officers must be protected. But Democrats point out that other police officers, other law enforcement officials, do not wear masks, and they are able to continue their work. Of course, the administration continues to point out that they are not targeted in the same way as ICE officials. So it's a little bit of a circular argument here, Major. But what we don't know is at this point where those negotiations stand, because the Democrats were very clear in the issue of masks being one of 10 points in a proposal that they brought to the White House. And even though they've been going back and forth, we don't know where it stands. We know, Major, that the president would preferably like to get the government reopened fully before he delivers his State of the Union address next week.
Weijia Jiang at the White House. Thanks so very much. Obese and malnourished. That's how Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy describes a good number of Americans struggling with weight. He directly blames ultra-processed foods for this problem. Our political panel weighs in on Kennedy's assessment of that and the state of MAHA. That came up during his interview with 60 Minutes. That's next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Thank you for hanging out with us. Stephen A. Smith, a force of nature in sports journalism. He's on ESPN, Sirius XM, and as a guest on all variety of shows, eager to tap into his opinionated fame. Perhaps inevitably has come the tug of another arena, the political one, on CBS Sunday Morning. Smith told Robert Costa he's not, emphasized not, ruling out a presidential bid in 2028.
I'm a fiscal conservative. I can't stand high taxes, but I'm a social liberal. In the same breath, because I believe in living and let live. I pay attention to the desolate and the disenfranchised. Yes, I like strong borders. That's absolutely true. We never needed open borders, but we don't need it to be completely closed either. We're a gorgeous mosaic.
Sounds like you're getting a stump speech ready, Stephen.
No, there's no stump speech. I can give a speech without a note in front of me.
I want to bring in our political panel. Rena Shah, Republican strategist, former senior congressional advisor. John McCarthy, Democratic strategist, former senior advisor to President Biden. All right, John, let me start with you. In an era of American politics where fame and celebrity carry a kind of cachet that they did not even 15 years ago, is Stephen A. Smith someone we should think about and factor into the possible 2028 conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for both political parties here, there's a wide lane open during the nomination contest, and that's for outsiders. Every single election cycle, we keep hearing from voters telling us they don't like politicians. So whether it's him or someone else, I think that one of the widest open lanes to become the next president is probably be someone who's not serving in current office.
When you heard him say to Robert Costa he is a Democrat, did that surprise you?
It didn't. I mean, I hope everyone runs as a Democrat, right? And for the way it looks now, we're going to have 25 people on our debate stage. So, I mean, I think that that's great. I mean, I think in the way that he's been talking about this, he's been able to kind of thread an important needle that I think a lot of candidates can't do right now, and that's that he's pretty disenfranchised with both sides. Yes, he said he'd run as a Democrat, but he was also pretty critical of Trump, and then was pretty critical of Vice President Harris. And you know who else is? The American people. Right. And that's where the voters are. So.
Yeah, I think he's a perfect candidate for anyone. I think
really?
I really do, because he knows games, right? And what bigger game is there than politics?
Politics is a game, yeah.
He's got a lot of opinions. He doesn't hide from them. He doesn't apologize. I think that's a big one, too, because, again, who's going to follow Trump that's going to look apologetic?
So he meets that nuance threshold of authenticity, which is hard to define, but people think they know it when they see it.
But one definition is that voters do not want anybody who's weak, anybody that, again, apologizes for who they are, tries to be too politically correct, and really stands out of the pack by doing things a bit differently. I think Stephen A. Smith is just that kind of person. I think he's interesting.
We teased this when we went to break, and one of the iron rules of this show, there aren't many, but one of the iron rules is if I tease it, I should bring it up later. I should really follow through. So let me follow through on Robert F. Kennedy Jr., HHS Secretary, talking to 60 Minutes, Bill Whitaker, about ultra-processed foods and American obesity. Let's listen.
How do we know what is safe to eat?
There is no way for any American to know if a product is safe if it is ultra-processed.
So this was an interesting piece because it took Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on vaccines, and David Kessler, former head of the FDA, when he was head of the FDA, brought down big tobacco in common cause with Robert F. Kennedy, not on vaccines, but on ultra-processed foods, showing that there is this relationship that can be forged that could be possibly, from a regulatory point of view and a political point of view, pretty powerful. John?
Yeah, I mean, I'm conscious that I'm saying this in front of a bowl of candy here, which I'm sure is all very organic.
Very organic. Hardly any processing there at all.
Not. But, I think every American, this is a bipartisan issue that people can agree on. They know that ultra-processed foods are not good for you. I think, if you think about affordability, I think that most Americans wish they had access to affordable whole foods. That's a real issue in lots of parts of the country. But I think where RFK starts to lose credibility is where, he starts kind of moving into this land of conspiracy theories, tying Tylenol to autism and his vaccine skepticism. So, nothing is all bad. I think that what he's saying on Americans should eat more whole foods is common sense, but we have to be very conscious of the other things that he's saying too.
Rena, let's cut to the chase. You worked on Capitol Hill. You know that this is a very big industry. It's not just ag, it's food companies and their relationship to ag. And it's very hard to rewrite these rules. Lots of farm bills have looked into this and said, maybe not. The politics too tough.
And I don't want to be ageist here, but look at the crop of people on Capitol Hill. These aren't particularly young people. These aren't people that are more aware of their health. They probably don't have even that much life in front of them where they're that observant of what they're really putting in their body. They're kind of living for the moment because, again, they're powerful people who have access to money and funds where they can eat well if they want to, right? They're not facing the problems that most Americans are. I remember I was in college when I first heard the phrase Whole Foods, whole paycheck. And I never went to the chain for that very reason until I was out as a young professional. Even then, I had sticker shock. Where I come from, rural West Virginia, I'm particularly nervous about those communities because those communities, again, salt-of-the-earth people that like to grow their own food. But when we're talking about all the problems here, they are multifaceted. And I don't know that one crusader can change the game. I certainly hope so, because all food's starting to taste the same out there, to be honest.
And ultra-processed foods are cheaper.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're more accessible if you live in a food desert, which is to say a community that does not have a large grocery store, but has mini-marts and things like that. And you go into a mini-mart, what are the shelves filled with?
Exactly, these overly
And RFK Jr. in that interview made a commitment that we're going to get the price of whole food, not processed food, down. Well, that's a political opening if achieved or not achieved.
Major, let me be real clear with you, though, about this. I think this is important. I've gone to a MAHA roundtable, and I've sat there with many people in the room that were saying very normal things. A lot of these were mothers who have young children like mine. I have 3 small children, and they are women who are frustrated. They want to look at food as medicine. Now, I'm the daughter of a doctor, wife of 1, and sister of 2. So I look at food that way from when I was a little girl. But I am concerned that the MAHA movement cannot make the strides and impact it wants to have as long as the vaccine stuff continues to hold. And so I'm hopeful that something will change because this is a very timely argument.
That is a great and meaningful perspective. Rena Shaw, thank you very much. John McCarthy, you always have meaningful and valuable perspectives as well, but she was on the button right there. I appreciate it. U.S. women's hockey team heading to the gold medal game after cruising past Sweden today. Next, we've got the latest from Milan. In Italy, they call it Milano. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back. The U.S. women's hockey team will play for the gold medal. They beat Sweden 5-0 today. Kelly O'Grady joins me now from Milan. As I said, Milano is how they say it in Italy. Last Friday, you brought us breaking and heartbreaking news about Ilya Malinin. You've got much better news today about U.S. women's hockey and U.S. women bobsledders.
I do, Major. Let's start with the hockey. So we are set now for USA versus Canada women's hockey. It's Thursday. It is a rematch of every single gold medal game in the history of this, except for one match. So this is going to be really, really exciting. And by the way, you mentioned that this was a shutout against Sweden. We were in the arena. The ladies, they were gelling, passing the puck very, very well. They looked like a well-oiled machine. And the fact that they shut them out, this today became the longest stretch in ice hockey history in the Olympics where you have had no goals scored by the opposing team. So the women looking very good going into that match against Canada. By the way, in a preliminary round, they already beat Canada 5-0, though the women's team captain from Canada was out. So we will see if they are able to do anything there. But also, you mentioned the monobob. Alana Myers-Taylor, she finally got her gold. It had eluded her. This is her 5th straight Olympics. She now has 6 Olympic medals, a gold to add today. We also picked up a bronze in that event, but she, with that medal, became the most decorated American woman in Winter Games history. So a really exciting day. And after 24 hours where, you know, the Americans didn't win a medal, we're back on the podium, Major.
1 minute to go, Kelly. Tell me about curling.
The Canadians may be cheating, Major. That's the allegation in both men's and women's. I know. I thought the Canadians were so nice and that curling was a gentleman's game. What's going on here? But basically, there is the accusation that they're doing a double touch. And so you are allowed to touch the handle of the stone up until the point that it crosses the hogs line, which is essentially the release line. The Canadians are accused of hitting it just a little bit past that. And by the way, there was some very foul language. People, emotions were running high, and so they were also called out for that. But we will see going forward. But yes, the Canadians really going for gold in all sorts of ways, Major.
And those who watch curling, a very serene thing to watch, by the way, notice that all the players are mic'd. So when there are vulgarities, when there are swear words spewed like they were by the Canadians, we all get to hear, whether we want to or not. Kelly O'Grady, thanks so very much. We appreciate it. Fresh off his summiting of Mount Everest, CBS News political contributor Terry Sullivan treks through Antarctica. Next, my conversation with a man I think is the most adventurous man in all of Washington. That's next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back. Republican strategist and CBS News political contributor Terry Sullivan has learned plenty about politics and plenty from politics. He has also become a student of danger and fear in the natural world. Months ago, he ascended Mount Everest, and a few weeks back, he trekked across Antarctica. Recently, he and I sat down to compare these adventures. Why are you, among all the people I've met in Washington in more than 30 years, the most adventurous spirit? You've climbed Mount Everest, and you're just back from Antarctica.
Yeah, well,
what is that about?
Well, thank you for the compliment. I don't know that I'm the most adventurous, but I do some crazy things, and I do have a sense of adventure. Look, I think we should all do big things in life, things that are bigger than us. I think it's important to push our boundaries, get outside of our comfort zone. It makes us better people. It makes us understand the world around us. Just sitting and being in D.C. And look, the number one question, you and I both know, when you meet anybody in D.C., the first question is, what do you do for a living? So it's like, you know, and I like to know, what do you do for fun? It doesn't have to be climb a mountain. It can be, we've got mutual, look at Jonathan Martin. If you ever want to know where the best food in any dive city in America, or maybe the world is, Jonathan will tell you. We've got lots of friends like that push beyond these, just, doing things that are interesting and learning about the world around us. And that's, I love to do, mountains and adventure.
How much for that is confronting fear for you?
A lot. I mean, look, when you purposely do dangerous things, everything else seems much more relaxing. I mean, think about it. Like, I watch people now. I used to hate air travel. I mean, I still don't like it, but I used to hate how stressful it was, and you're going to miss your flight and this, and rushing through an airport. And now I'm like, well, wait a minute. If I miss my flight, it's about 70 degrees in this airport. There are places to sit. There's a food court.
There's a bathroom right over there.
More importantly, there's a bar serving. Like, it's, when you're in a tent,
my needs are going to be met here.
When you're in a tent, it's -20, or you're worried about any exposed skin getting frostbite. Like, those are real issues, or falling off of a rope line, or these type things, or falling in a crevasse. And so it's like, all the other stuff is small stuff. What's the old Zig Ziglar, or was it Dale Carnegie, one of them that said, don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff. Well, if you do some stupid things, sometimes it is all small stuff.
You describe them as stupid things. Yeah. That's your terminology. You're entitled to it, but you don't go about them stupidly, do you?
No, I don't. I train hard. I practice. I work with really smart people. Like, look, nobody, anybody who's climbed a mountain has a wonderful picture of them standing on the top. No one person got to the top of a mountain by themselves. Just hasn't happened in the history of mankind. And you do it with a team and do it with a group to differing degrees. Some people are much more solo-oriented. Some people do it with a big team. I probably fall somewhere in the middle where I work with. But like, from getting there, the food preparation, when you're traveling on a glacier, any glacier travel, you really can't travel by yourself. You have to be roped up to at least one other person. You fall in one of these giant crevasses, you got to have someone to drive their ice axe in and save you from going all the way down. And so there's a lot of who you're roped in with, the relationships you have. You got to do it with people you trust, everything about them. Trust them with your life.
Is anything that you just described analogous to politics?
Yeah, so much of it. So much of it. In a much more pure way. I think that climbing mountains is much more fair. Like, the rules of engagement are, the weather's the big variable. That's it. I mean, but the mountain is the mountain. It is an equal opportunity abuser, no matter who you are. Politics, man, it's all over the place. But aside from that, it's doing things that are bigger than ourselves. Having a purpose, having a cause. It's very similar to running a campaign. There is a definite end date. There's not a guaranteed outcome. Winning is amazing. Losing sucks. And you learn a lot along the way. And so I do think there's, in many ways, it's that kind of doing something that's bigger than just who we are as a person is the biggest connection between the two.
Let me drive into the question of trust, because you mentioned trust during mountaineering. You got to have it in politics. A mountain won't betray you.
Yeah.
But someone in politics will.
Sure. I was going to say, the person I'm roped up to, a difference, person I'm roped to, my life is in their hands as much as it is vice versa. And what with their life is in mine.
In your hands.
Yeah. And so in politics, that's not always the case. And, we're roped together, and if one of us falls off the mountain, the other's going too. In politics, sometimes someone cuts that line.
My thanks to Terry Sullivan. Happy President's Day, everyone. This is The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The Daily Report, coming up next.